Hello and welcome into another edition of the Sun Devil Source podcast, as always, presented by Jones Auto Centers. I'm your host, Jacob Brooks. Alongside me is our Sun Devil Source publisher, Chris Karpman. Chris, we got a little bit of a new style of podcast going. We're going to have a 4-part mini series of podcasts leading up to ASU football's fall camp, which starts just over a week from today. How are you feeling about all that?
Yeah, I'm feeling good. August 5th launch, a little bit later than normal, but it's because they don't play a game until September 5th. Normally it's about a month before their first game that they open camp. And I always find that our camp preview podcast gets squeezed because of how much we're trying to condense and pack in. And I just decided, hey, let's actually do it in several parts where we can spend more time talking about the individual players. People who are Sun Devil Source subscribers are able to read about every single player in depth and also watch a video that we put out that describes all of the background and evaluation of all these guys as well. So you can pour in even a lot more than what we're going to be doing in these podcasts, but I feel like this is going to be a very good primer to get everybody ready for the start of camp.
Absolutely. So to just kind of break it all down, part one in this episode, we're going to be breaking down quarterbacks, running backs, and wide receivers. In part two, we're going to be breaking down offensive line, defensive line, and tight ends. And then in part three, we're going to be breaking down the secondary and linebackers. And then part four is going to be a member exclusive podcast. So if you're not tapped in on the Sun Devil Source board, make sure to get on that. We're going to be talking about our biggest storylines and expectations to watch heading into what should be a very interesting fall camp. Chris and I will both be out there on Wednesday, August 5th, bringing you guys stuff from day one of camp and beyond. But Chris, let's start with the quarterbacks. There's a lot to talk about at the quarterback position. Obviously, the departure of Sam Leavitt after the conclusion of last season left a lot up in the air at the quarterback position, but ASU went out, got Cutter Boley in the transfer portal. You said on the record you think he has probably about an 80% chance to become the starter once this camp begins. What have you seen from him throughout his time at Kentucky, as well as throughout spring practices, that makes you confident enough to make that assertion?
Yeah, I did a deep dive on Cutter Boley, watched not just the television copies of all of his reps last year, but also watched some all 22 of a few games to really see the entire field and try to understand where he's at with his development. Felt like spring ball was a little bit slow incorporating him, getting familiar with all of the scheme, the terminology, the other players. That's a lot for somebody who really only had 1 year of playing college football under his belt. He had redshirted the prior year at Kentucky, not really any game action there. I felt like as spring ball unfolded, he got better to the point where in the last couple of scrimmages, he was as good or probably maybe even better than the other quarterback options. And I wouldn't say that he outplayed others, overall, especially Mikey Keene. If we're just evaluating the entirety of the spring, Mikey Keene is a little bit of more of an advantage, I would say, because he's started multiple seasons between two other schools. He's learned offenses at 3 different schools. He's older and he's a very cerebral player. So I felt like Boley had a likely better rate of development the longer that he practices at ASU, particularly because he's much less of a finished product, I would say. So if you look at it and you factor in Boley's the highest paid player on ASU's roster by far, I would say, probably at least double anybody else. He had the trajectory that showed development through spring ball that's likely to continue because he's earlier in his trajectory. He's bigger, he's stronger, he is more mobile than Mikey Keene, better arm talent, right? So there's a lot of things that bode well for him winning this job. The most important thing is going to be avoiding turnovers. When you commit turnovers, it robs the confidence of your coaches. And Mikey Keene, even though he probably also turned the ball over too much in some prior seasons, generally is going to be viewed as operationally less likely to commit turnovers. So practices over the next few weeks, really the first 3 weeks of August, when this quarterback decision is going to be made, are going to be in large part determined by who does the best job at not only managing an offense, but also taking care of the football. ASU was better than its peers in the Big 12 2 years ago with a young Sam Levitt, who had never done it before, at not giving the ball away. First in the Big 12 in the regular season at turnover margin and fewest turnovers. That was a springboard to their success that they had last season. Cutter Boley averaged more than a turnover per start last year. I don't think it was quite 1.5, but it was probably like a 1.2, 1.3. That's far too high. He's got to have that turnover rate be more like under 1.0, and a great mark would be more like averaging half of a turnover per game. That's probably too much to ask, but really being closer to or under 1.0 is a really key thing for him. And a lot of that comes down to taking what's there for you, not trying to force the ball, making sure that what you think you're going to get pre-snap is what it looks like coverage is turning into post-snap, and also not throwing the ball into danger needlessly. Sometimes you got to just throw the ball at the feet of the running back when the screen isn't set up, or you got to throw the ball out of bounds, right? If something's not there for you. And you can't take negative plays. That's where you get sacked too much. He's a big guy. He's not going to be sacked as easily as others because of his size. But last season, he was prone to fumbling the ball too much when hit in the backfield. So it's not just interceptions. It's also making sure that you have strong hands on the ball and that you keep the ball located properly and that you get rid of it when you need to. He has, as we're going to talk about in this podcast, ample playmakers that he can distribute the football to. The staff did a very good job at getting him wide receivers. And ultimately, I do feel like Boley's the most likely to be the ASU starting quarterback. He has the ability to get the ball down the field. He gets the ball out of his hand reasonably quickly when he's in a good rhythm. And he tends to be able to be accurate with where he's throwing the football, short, intermediate, and long. So really it's about continuing to improve his overall decision-making and his ability to read coverage and understand the down, distance, and situation.
And Chris, you talk about that confidence that you have that Boley is most likely going to end up the starter, a guy who got a little bit of juice. You touched on him a little bit, but a little bit of juice surrounding his name this summer was Mikey Keene. What have you kind of seen from him in his time at ASU? Because obviously he had a roller coaster college career, being a local product, and then now finding his way back all these years later.
Yeah, started at UCF, started at Fresno State in Kenny Dillingham's worst game coaching as a head coach. ASU was shut out by Fresno State at Mountain America Stadium in his first year in the non-conference in 2023, and that was just a really bad taste in everyone's mouth. Mikey Keene was the starting quarterback for that team. Jalen Moss, one of ASU's receivers, was on that team, so they have familiarity from that. And I would just describe Keene as a smooth operator. ASU fans are very familiar with Trenton Bourguet. I would say that they're comparable in terms of their style and their ability to get the ball out of their hands quickly, their size, and some of the other attributes that they have, with Mikey Keene having a little bit better arm talent than Trenton Bourguet. So he is somebody who understands the likely coverages that he's facing on going into any given play. Then he understands correspondingly where the best place is for him to go deliver the football. If he needs to make any sort of check, audible, adjustment, should be able to be a little bit safer in terms of not putting the ball into jeopardy and getting the ball out of his hands in a hurry in a lot of their quick game and rhythm passing concepts. He just doesn't have good size to hold up physically. And he also is not an athletic player, so he's not a scrambler. He's not going to be out of the pocket doing things dynamically. He's somebody who has to have a lot of early rep success with distributing the football quickly, balanced with a potent run game to really allow him to flourish. And then another aspect of this, which is part of the reason why I think that Boley is the likely starter, is that Keene's ability to get the ball down the field is a little bit more limited with his arm talent than Boley. And you have some big play weapons, Omarion Miller, Reed Harris, Raiden Vinesbright, et cetera, right? You got Jaron Hamilton, Jalen Moss, right? So you have weapons and you want to be able to utilize all of them to the best of your ability. I'm not quite sure that ASU would get that as much if it went with Mikey Keene.
And Chris, ASU has two other younger quarterbacks on the roster in Jake Fetty and Cam Dyer. Where do you feel like those two guys are currently at in their developments? And is there any realm of possibility where one of them has a shot at the starting job this fall?
I would say an outside chance for Jake Fetty. I'll talk about Cam Dyer first. I feel like he made a lot of really positive gains in bowl practices last year and then continuing on in spring ball this year. He tore a ACL in a state semifinal playoff game in his senior year of high school in New Mexico. He was a Gatorade Player of the Year multiple seasons, the best skill player in the state. But that injury, which he tried to play on in the state championship game, by the way, and the team wasn't nearly as good with him injured. That necessitated a rehab that basically sidelined him until November of last year, when he was really fully clear to get out there and do practice without restrictions. So that hurt his development a little bit, but I feel like he still had a pretty good practice schedule in their 10, 12 practices in December. And then I feel like he made a lot of gains in spring ball, and that trajectory is going to continue. Like he was recruited to ASU as a wide receiver. They gave him a chance to be a quarterback, and I feel like he's at least demonstrated that he can be a quarterback at the Division I level, but he's not ready to challenge the other two that we've already talked about extensively. And then Jake Fetty, who was the top-ranked recruit in ASU's 2026 class and an early enrollee. He looked better in spring ball than every quarterback that I remember watching over the last couple of decades in a spring ball as a true freshman, with one notable exception being Jaden Daniels, who was tremendous in his first freshman spring, only had one turnover, and it was on a ball that he had to throw on the last play of their spring scrimmage, the final spring scrimmage. Fetty is quite similar in size, athleticism, and arm talent and athleticism to Sam Levitt. People are going to see a lot of Sam Levitt in Jake Fetty when they finally start to watch him in some of these scrimmages, like in the Camp Tonazona scrimmage. He'll probably play a lot, and fans will go, "Wait a second, is that Sam Levitt?" Nope, he's gone. That's Jake Fetty. Okay, they're pretty similar. So there's a lot to like. It's just a very large ask for a true freshman to be ready to start at this level, and also to outplay guys who have already started Power 4 games or extensively Division I football. And I think it's probably unlikely that he's going to catch up. And also, if you're ASU's coaches, you want to not rob him of his confidence, right? You don't want to undercut his development and in a way that hurts him for after this season or risks injury or any of those things. And so probably we won't see Jake Fetty unless The others don't play as well as hoped, and Fetty does extremely well, in which case you would imagine that his trajectory would overtake the others potentially and lead to the coaches maybe making the decision. But Kenny Dillingham has said very clearly he's trying to win every game that he can to the best of his ability, and this isn't like a building for the following future or later in a season type of a mindset that they have.
And Chris, last thing on the quarterbacks, I'm sure a lot of fans want to know, based off of your past years covering this team, what you feel like you understand about the decision-making process from Dillingham and Arroyo, and also little tidbits that they've maybe dropped in after practice media scrums. How long do you think this decision will take to name a starting quarterback?
Yeah, so the earliest that I could envision that happening would be after the Arizona scrimmage on the 15th of August. The latest that we could find out who the starting quarterback is going to be publicly would be a week before their season opener, probably on the Monday of their game week when they have a press conference. Probably the average period when we would find out would be the third week of August, somewhere maybe after a scrimmage that they would probably have in the stadium on like the 22nd of August. So I would put in, if we were going to guess the over-under, set an over-under, I might set it slightly before then, like at August 20th. I think we're going to find out within 5 days of August 20th, one way or the other, more than likely. And again, ball security. Okay. One of the last major quarterback competitions that I remember where there was multiple players involved, Mike Bercovici and Taylor Kelly and Michael Eubank were going at it at the end of spring ball. I guess this would be like 2015 or something. No, 2012. Pardon me. Taylor Kelly was third, I think, coming out of spring ball, and then the reason that he overtook the others, in addition to improved strength and ability to get the ball down the field, Mike Bercovici threw some interceptions in some of the scrimmages. Eubank didn't display the necessary command of the offense that they needed, and Taylor Kelly soared to the front. So you can never completely project how some of these things are going to go, but I have a reasonably high confidence level in Cutter Boley emerging as a starter.
All right. Well, with that in mind, let's transition a little bit towards the running backs. There's a lot to talk about with this running back room, Chris. You've talked about in some of those player capsules that we actually filmed on the running backs at Big 12 Media Day, if you guys haven't checked those out yet. You talked about how you think this is one of the deepest ASU running back rooms in years. And the guy who a lot of people are kind of viewing as the head and shoulders of that room is Kyson Brown. Kyson Brown was obviously ASU's starting running back at the beginning of the season last year. He gets hurt in his homecoming game against Mississippi State, then isn't really able to get back going over the course of the rest of the season. And then you got Raleek Brown just coming and taking it and running with it. He ends up making the all-conference team, but Raleek Brown transfers. He goes to Texas. Now Kyson Brown is kind of looking at this year as kind of his revenge tour year, redshirt junior. He's on the Pat Tillman Leadership Council now. Chris, when I had my one-on-one interview with him at Big 12 Media Day, he looked at me and he said, I want to kill this year. What are you expecting from him for this season?
Well, I'm not entirely sure, but I do believe that he's improved. Spring ball, I saw the best contact balance that I've ever seen from Kyson Brown. And that to me is the area where he had the biggest room for improvement in his game. Everybody knows that Cam Scadaboo broke a lot of tackles and stayed upright through a lot of situations where others would go to the ground. And you'll remember last year, even though Raleek Brown had a 1,000-yard season and was an all-conference caliber player and highly prized in the transfer portal going to Texas, he only ran for 4 touchdowns. And ASU's ability to keep drives going on 3rd or 4th and short and to convert goal line opportunities into touchdowns was far less than it had been the prior year with Cam Scadaboo. And running back isn't the only thing that goes into that. ASU lost Ben Coleman to an injury and struggled to replace Lee Faltanu's center production. And the O-line didn't do quite as well, probably blocking due to that and other factors. But there just simply wasn't enough physicality in the run game at the point of attack. Kyson Brown is a track guy. He's one of the faster 100-meter running backs that ASU's had in recent decades, like a 10.7 or 10.65 type of 100-meter. And he's 205 pounds, ripped, right? Shredded muscularity. But that didn't translate well enough to his ability to stay upright through contact in practices, even in drills or in games. And we didn't really get to see enough last season to know had he made quite a bit of progress or not much, or where was he at with that. I do think that this spring he made it an emphasis. I asked him about it at Big 12 Media Day. He said that was a focus, getting his shoulders a little bit lower because he's such an upright runner, and making sure that you have good leg drive through contact. They have a wide variety of different types of backs that they intended. They have the scat back types. We're going to talk about them. They have the bigger body transfers. We're going to talk about them. Kyson Brown is one of the more full service running backs that they have, if he's able to demonstrate this improved ruggedness on early downs, because he has that game breaking ability when he's in the open field. He's a guy that you can throw the ball to a lot, working out of the perimeter, maybe their most skilled guy catching the football and being able to make plays. He understands their protections and should be able to be a blocker. So the real question for him as he tries to win a starting job and then keep that is, how is he going to do in tough yard situations? And if he does reasonably well at that, I anticipate he'll be at least one of their primary backs, maybe in a shared role situation. And if he doesn't do well enough in that regard, then I think he may become more of a situational player who's utilized for his receiving ability, third downs, other situations where you want to have maybe two running backs on the field together.
Well, Chris, two guys who are going to be hot on the competition trail to try and steal touches away from someone like Kyson Brown are going to be Marquise Gillis and David Abbott, two of ASU's senior portal running back additions from the FCS level. And Chris, it was no secret to anybody who caught a game at Mountain America Stadium or watched it through TV, as you mentioned, with those 4 Malik Brown touchdowns, that ASU was not particularly good in short yardage situations in the running game last year. Kanye Udo, who was brought in from Army, was supposed to kind of play that role, and that didn't really work out to its full potential. Udo left in the transfer portal. So with Gillis and Abbott coming in, how do you feel like they will be able to fit into that niche that was not a strength for ASU last season?
Yeah, this is really a key focal area of ASU's offense going into the season. One thing that I needed to correct from our player capsule on David Abbott, we said he was a senior. He's actually a junior. So he has 2 more years of eligibility after being one of the best short yardage and goal line backs at the FCS level at Villanova, which was when they lost, I think, in the semifinals of the FCS playoffs last year. So they were one of the better FCS teams. And ASU had found a stat which indicated that Abbott converted 3rd and 4th and short and goal line situations at a higher rate than almost anybody at the FCS level. Like he was 2nd or 3rd, I believe. And as you said there, Kanye Udo, that didn't work out. You got to kind of give ASU a break on that, because Sean Aguano has been so good at getting successful running back transferred from a variety of levels, from this Cam Scadaboos, Valades, Rashad Whites, Benjamins. He's done it from everywhere, right? But I think it was savvy of ASU to take 2 transfers so that they had another option in the event that one of these guys isn't as good as they expected in the role. I think while Abbott's a 225-pounder who should be able to get tough yards after contact in situations where they need to extend drives or convert drives into touchdowns, I think Gillis is a little bit more full service of a player. He's 210 pounds, very rugged, physical player, while also having enough athletic dynamism to be able to win the corner, to outrace guys on the edge to some degree, to have more of a variety of bigger plays. He had a bunch of big play runs last year, like maybe twice as many as Abbott. And he was a nearly 1,200 yard rusher. I think he was 13th at the FCS level. And he has just like a hunger about him that I really think is palpable when you watch him play. To me, if I'm evaluating ASU's running backs in terms of their NFL potential, I think Gillis would be about as high as anybody. I actually really like Carde Mack, who we'll talk about in a bit, in that respect as well. But I do believe that between these two guys, the two D1 upperclassmen transfers, they played in schemes that were more transferable to what ASU does, whereas Kanye Udo played in a wishbone, flexbone scheme that was quite different, and it didn't really translate in the way that they had expected.
And Chris, you said we're going to talk about Carde Mack in a bit. Let's talk about him and Grayson Brigden, two of the young backs on this roster. What are their kind of upsides and ceilings within this offense? Because they might be behind a lot of these older guys and then some sophomores that we'll talk about after.
Yeah, Rigdon, I think, was one of the more improved players in the spring on the roster. Phenomenal high school athlete who has a extremely compelling background. He played at the absolute smallest school that you could be in Texas. And it was like 6-man football or something in his freshman year. And then he moved up after a few years and eventually played 11-man, but he won a state championship in every year in football. He's like arguably the winningest, most successful high school football player in Texas state history, which is pretty crazy when you think about it.
There's a lot of people to come out of there.
Yeah, and then I think they lost one or two games in high school, and then also phenomenal basketball player. He was a guard who averaged 30-something points per game in a couple of seasons. So overlooked as a recruit because he played at such a small classification. When he arrived at ASU, I saw a guy who was 190, 195 pounds who looked thin at that weight, and he added about 20 pounds. He's probably more like a 210, 215 now. He's probably going to get even bigger. He's a contact balance back who has the ability to stay upright, not necessarily this top end speed. So people are calling him baby scat because he's not the game breaker, and he's more of the physical lunch pail, tackle breaking type of a guy who's going to be a 215, 220 pound player. I don't think that he's ready quite yet to challenge some of these other options for a 2-deep role, but I do think that he has that type of potential in the next year or two. And there's a really good chance that Kyson Brown and Gillis will be gone. And so then they'll thin it out and he'll be more apt to compete. And then Carde Mack, I feel like, is as well-rounded as anybody in the group, with the possible exception of Kyson Brown, and that's only because of the age difference between them. Mack needs to get a little bit leaner. He came in a little bit, probably body composition, needed a little bit of work to get into a better configured 200 or 205 pounds. But gosh, he has really sweet feet. He has the ability to get skinny in a hole and instantly read blocking development in just an instinctual way that really was compelling. And he seems to be just beyond his years in terms of his feel for the game. And so you can never, running back is a position, Jacob, where guys can sometimes play earlier than elsewhere. Like, you may not have all the protections and have the sophistication, but if you know you're getting the ball, right, you can go out there and make plays. So
yeah,
I would say, other than Jake Fetty, the only freshman who really has a from what I saw in the spring, a clear opportunity to maybe play as a true freshman would be Carde Mack.
And now, Chris, there are two sophomores who are young just like these guys, but a little more experience on this roster in Demarius Man Robinson and Jason Brown Jr., two guys who get a lot of buzz on the sanctuary. And I was just wondering, what are your kind of expectations for where those guys slot in? Because they're in kind of this in-between spot where they don't have as much experience as some of the older backs, but they have more experience than these younger backs and feel like, hey, we can come in, we can make an impact. We were hooping in the Sun Bowl. We got some snaps last year. Where do you think they're at?
Yeah, I was, I think a lot of people know, watching our podcast, but especially people who are members at Sun Devil Source know I was very high on Jason Brown. Felt like he probably didn't get as much burn last season throughout the year as he deserved. And then he had a phenomenal performance until the Sun Bowl, all the way until the last couple of minutes when he lost a fumble that was really the pivotal play of the game. ASU lost probably because he fumbled. And that's a hard pill to swallow after having such a great performance, which included more than 10 yards per carry and a bunch of runs that showed how sudden and explosive that he is in an athlete. He's like shot out of a cannon out of the backfield with quickness to basically he enables blocks to not be sustained as long. And if defenders make missteps after the snap, he can beat them with an angle. So he's very impressive to me, but he has to take better care of the football. He also had fumbles on a couple, 2-3 occasions in spring ball that were glaring. And Sean Aguano has said that trust is the most important criterion for who's going to play. And taking care of the football is the number one factor in that, right? So got to take better care of the football. If he does that, then I view him as just a very good option to pair with one or more of these other backs. And then Man Robinson has an alpha identity that allowed him to hit the ground running last year as a true freshman, didn't look out of place or intimidated by the setting of being at a major college level. That enabled him to play a fair amount. He's quick and he's skilled with the ball, doesn't have maybe great top end speed, but in the passing game as a space weapon and as an ability to kind of have bigger plays, I would say that he's also a dynamic option that they have. I don't quite like him as much as Jason Brown in this grouping of these two scat backs, but it's close enough to where, especially if one is taking care of the football a lot better than the other, that's going to be what determines who ends up playing.
All right, we've talked about quarterbacks. We've talked about running backs. We have to talk about this wide receiver room. But first, we'll hear a quick word from our presenting podcast sponsors over at Jones Auto Centers.
For over 60 years, the Glenn Jones name has been recognized for integrity and honesty.
From the Jones Auto Centers in Wickenburg.
Jones Ford Verde Valley.
Take a nice country drive out the Buckeyes.
When you're talking about Arizona's best, you're talking about the Jones Auto Group. It's quick, fast, strong.
I want to invite you to visit our new facility in Casa Grande and enjoy our country-style way of doing business. We're the Joneses.
Welcome back into the Sun Devil Source podcast presented by Jones Auto Centers. Wherever you're watching or listening to this podcast, be sure to check out the description underneath because you can contact Parker Jones directly through phone or email if you're interested in buying a new or used vehicle from one of Jones Auto Centers' many dealerships around the Valley. Parker Jones and Jones Ford Verde Valley have been huge supporters of ASU's NIL efforts over the past several years, so we're proud to have them as our podcast presenting sponsors, and that's another great reason for you Sun Devil fans and you Sanctuary board members to make them your go-to if you live in the Valley and you need a new or used vehicle. All right, Chris, let's talk about these wide receivers. The wide receiver room, it was the talk of the town this offseason. Obviously, you have a guy in Jordan Tyson, NFL caliber talent. He goes top 10 in the draft, and everyone's wondering, how are you going to replace him? Well, ASU brings in two of the top 5 wide receivers in the transfer portal in Omarion Miller and Reed Harris. And get this, they got two of the top 5 guys in the portal There was no other team in the country who even got 2 of the top 15 guys in the portal. So a big grab for Hines Ward and company. Chris, let's start with Omarion Miller because he has kind of that similar arc to Jordan Tyson going from Colorado to ASU. They both wore the number 4 at Colorado. What are your expectations for Omarion Miller this year? Is he a guy that you could see similarly to Tyson getting all that NFL buzz a year from now?
There are some major similarities, not just the fact that they went to Colorado, but very strong players. People will remember, I think, that Jordan Tyson was far superior to like all the other wide receivers in his bench press at the NFL Combine. And Omarion Miller is an extremely strong wide receiver. At 6'2", 210 pounds, maybe not quite as much top end speed as Jordan Tyson. Like, I think he's a 4.4 or something guy, but he's not a sub 4.4, maybe not even a low 4.4. But he has explosive power. And then what he also does that's similar to Tyson is his body control, his ability to adjust to the ball in the air, his ability to make catches that are contested with defenders draping him is elite or near elite. So it is really the strength that enables a lot of that, with the timing and the ball adjustment skills and the ability to catch the ball in difficult situations. Something that's very fascinating about Miller, he led the Big 12 in yards per catch last year with 18 yards per catch, even though he wasn't anywhere close to the top in terms of the number of catches. He had 45 catches, so it's not like, 45 catches for 808 yards. Like, he was a very productive player, but he's so explosive, and he was 8th among Power 4 wide receivers in his yards after the catch. He averaged 7.5 or something yards after the catch last year. And that's because he has almost like running back like strength and contact balance. So he takes a lot of hits on quick screens, slants, things of this nature that don't bring him to the ground. He gets a lot of yards after the catch. He's a 3-level route runner. He still is going to get a lot better in his ability to run the diverse NFL route tree. His intermediate catches were more like slants than they were like curls and comebacks and things that are more sophisticated. But he takes the top off the defense with his explosive power and ability to make contested grabs. He's a great screen game weapon because of how strong that he is and his explosiveness. And he can run through a defense. So you put all that together and you have an extremely dynamic player who projects to being a day 1 or day 2 NFL draft type pick, especially at the size that he has.
And Chris, you talk about size. Reed Harris is even larger out there on the practice field, making big body receptions, a little bit of a different play style than Omarion Miller's, I'm sure you'll get into, but just as much NFL draft upside. What do you project for Reed Harris this year?
He's an elite jump ball and post up target. And that matters a lot in the red zone and when you're, in the end zone and things are a lot more constricted, and more than likely you're going to have guys that are better defended, right? When you get into these closer quarters, Reed Harris has the ability to make a lot of catches where he's got a defender on his hip, on his backside, and they just can't get around him, or they can't get high enough to where he is to catch the football. He's also a major chain mover. You can throw the ball to him, the back shoulder fades, the third down, contested catches. He's got a big arsenal. You can move him around. You can put him as a big slot option. You can play him on the perimeter. He's probably going to be the X, which is more the boundary side, outside receiver. Omarion Miller, probably more of the Z, which is the outside on the other side. But these guys have the flexibility and versatility to move them around. And they pair well with one another. They both can make the contested grabs, the big, strong, physical, Harris had no drops last season. Miller had several. I think that the hand strength and the ability to make extended arm grabs in Reed Harris at 6'5", 215 pounds is more similar to the athletic tight ends that you see, the hybrid tight ends, like Todd Heap early on in his ASU career, than the typical wide receiver. It's extremely rare for ASU to have a guy 6'4" or taller as a true wide receiver who has this blend of skill level and athleticism. He's not going to be a huge separator, like he's not a speed burner on the perimeter, okay? But he does have the ability to get behind the defense and make big plays.
And Chris, with all the buzz around Miller and Reed Harris, a guy who's kind of gotten overlooked a little bit is Raiden Vinesbright, who was also a top 30 wide receiver in the portal in his own right.
Just a correction, he actually initially when he committed he was, then he slipped as the thing went on. He was like 70th or something in the final. In the final rank.
That's a big difference.
Well, he committed early, and then a lot more guys populated the portal. And then he also dropped a little bit, which, by the way, I think is unfair to him. But, please continue.
Yeah. He's coming off of that true freshman season at Washington. He was a local product who took that venture out. And then Kenny Dillingham, he talked about it in one of his post-practice availabilities. He said he told him when he committed to Washington, he was like, hey, you're going to come back home eventually. And only took him 1 year, and now he's back in Tempe. What are your expectations for him this season as kind of like that third in command to Miller and Reed Harris, but also like over the course of his time in Tempe, could he maybe be next up in that sort of way?
When he committed to ASU, I not really spent a lot of time pouring in to understanding his skill set and attributes. And then more recently, when I wrote my full evaluation for his player capsule after spring football, which he was very impressive there. I felt like he might have been one of the steals of ASU's portal class. Like he might have been one of the most underrated guys. And the reasons are he's a little bit bigger and stronger than I had expected. 6'1", 200, 205, ripped, very physical, especially for somebody that garnered most of his reps in the slot. Normally you have a little bit lighter, smaller, shiftier guys there. He's a 10, 800-meter guy, so he's got long speed for a slot guy. And extremely skilled route running and feel for situations and the ability to make catches. And then what really takes him to another level is his blocking. He probably was one of the best freshmen blockers in the country last season. If you want to know why Raiden Vinesbright played so much, it was because he was probably the best blocker on Washington's team as a true freshman, as a wide receiver. And everybody should understand Hines Ward, ASU's wide receivers coach, one of the best blockers in NFL history, and somebody who will resonate a lot with the ability of a blocker like a Raiden Vinesbright. So you have a player who can, in the slot, which is where ASU used a lot of the Melquan Stovall's a couple of years ago to be an important blocker, and Xavier Guillory on the perimeter to really enhance their screen game capability. And when you have Miller and Harris, who you want to get the ball to as much as you can, and you have a blocker like Vinesbright, that really gives you a little bit more of an advantage. And it goes to the mindset of a player. Like, this is a guy who's got dog mentality. He's going to go the extra mile on a play-to-play basis for his teammates and be viewed as a extremely valuable part of what they're doing. And he had 20-something catches also last year. That's nothing to slouch at in a true freshman. So to me, I think he's the odds-on favorite to win the starting job in the slot as a very complementary player to these other options.
Chris, you mentioned how you think he's the odds-on player. There are some guys who still have a shot, some guys from last year that could maybe have a strong fall camp and get themselves into the mix. You have Jalen Moss, Derek Eusebio, and Jared Hamilton. Those are kind of the three guys who feel like they're still clinging on to a chance to have a really prominent role in this receiver room. What do you project for those three guys heading into this year?
Yeah, I think Jalen Moss is probably the most competitive threat to start, against maybe a Raiden Vinesbright. But he thrived in the Sun Bowl when Kenny Dillingham was calling plays. That was kind of a big performance. He had illness and injury issues that kind of marred his season overall. A lot more was expected from him. Then he had this breakout, and that allowed us to see what he had done at Fresno State when he was a very good player over a couple of years, around 1,000 yards, and one of their better skill players. And I feel like he has the ability to play Z or the H slot position they have at ASU, so he's versatile. He's got a very good feel for zone coverages, and he also has some ability to win vertically. Very good athlete. Jared Hamilton is a big play specialist. He's as fast as anybody at being able to get behind the defense as they have on the team. His overall route running and his feel for the position and the caliber of his hands to reliably catch the football are not quite as good as some of the other options, and they're going to need to be better. He's going to need to be better in those areas in order to go from a specialist who's out there because it opens up the underneath part of the field for others, or it breaks the coverage tendencies of an opponent and gives you that big play capability. If he wants to be able to be more than that, he's going to have to demonstrate improved hands, improved route running, improved feel situationally. And then Derek Eusebio is a very high floor, low ceiling option in the slot. Extremely trustworthy, works hard, great hands, catches everything. In fact, Jordan Tyson said that Derek Eusebio's hands were better than his hands.
Yeah,
which is saying quite a lot. But he doesn't have the quick twitch, burst, elusiveness, the top end speed that some of these other options have. So he's like the reliable, safe, high end guy, probably best suited to be like a number 2 slot guy and like their 4th or 5th receiver in terms of their overall number of snaps.
And Chris, to kind of round out the wide receiver room, there's a lot of younger guys. We don't have the time to break them all down one by one, but for the future of this wide receiver room, how much upside do you kind of see in some of those freshman guys?
I think some of them are good. Probably none of them will be in the 2 deep. We've already talked about, I think, 6 guys who are going to be your primary wide receiver group. Uriah Nellums had the best spring. He's big, physical. Maybe he's like an understudy to the Reed Harris type at somebody who's 6'4" and 210 or 215 pounds. He reminds me a little bit of Jarrell Robinson, somebody who doesn't have great speed, like a high 4.5s, 4.6 types, speed, but actually he plays and he is actually faster than he appears because he had one of the highest GPS tested mile per hours of anybody on ASU's team at that speed. So maybe I'm understating what his actual speed is. It just doesn't look as fast as what I understand his speed to be. And but he had a great spring. Harry Hassman, we thought he was going to play a little bit last year. He had an unfortunate ACL tear that he suffered in December in both practices, so he's not going to be ready at the outset of the season. And then Corey Butler's a slot option who reminds me quite a bit of Melquan Stovall and could be used maybe on punt return as a reliable, safe option there. And in a year or 2 from now, I think he can be a Stovall-like player for the Sun Devils who's in the 2 deep. So I'd like to see how those guys continue to kind of develop. The other wide receivers that they have, Chance Abel's been injured quite a lot, and we just haven't seen enough from him. I liked his high school film. And Michael Butter Tollison, he successfully transferred positions from quarterback to wide receiver in the spring and looked better than I had expected. He's got plenty of quick twitch and size to play the position. He just needs more seasoning, a year or two of development. And then ASU, very late, just their last addition to their roster was Jeremiah Johnson. He's from the Coachella Valley out there in the California desert. Desert Hot Springs, I think is where he's from, near Palm Springs. And he's got very good size and had planned to go to Navy. High academic, high character, played for a bad high school football team that really couldn't take advantage of his athleticism. So I'm interested in seeing how he does in camp, but probably he's not going to play that much this season.
And Chris, to kind of put a button on everything we've talked about in this episode, part 1 of our series, what are your expectations for just this overall skill position group that ASU has going for this year? A lot of turnover, a lot of fresh faces, but a lot of dynamic and exciting faces. How do you feel like this unit compares to last year, compares to 2024, that Big 12 title team, or just compares to units that you've seen throughout your time covering the Sun Devils?
Well, as you know, Jordan Tyson was a superstar, but there was a drop-off from Jordan Tyson to the rest of the group last year. And 2 years ago, they were also extremely reliant on Tyson. I look at this wide receiver group and I see as much depth and talent as they had when N'Keal Harry, Brandon Ayuk, Frank Darby, and others were a very talented group of wide receivers. Like, this is one of the more when Jalen Moss is your fourth receiving option, I look at that group as having the chance to be pretty special in ASU history. And then running back, they don't have the Cam Scadaboo or the Rashad White or Valladay or Eno Benjamin, perhaps, but I think that they have the components that should be able to enable them to be successful in everything that they want to do style-wise. They have the strong contrast, and so I don't view their running back room overall as a weakness. I think it's reasonably strong and should do a good job. If one or two players aren't working out, they have others that I think are ready and capable. So you're also going to be able to overcome injuries at these positions more easily than you would have in the past when you couldn't afford certain guys to get hurt. That matters a lot. At quarterback, I'm telling you, I can't stress it enough. So much of the success of the team is determined by the quarterback, and so much of that is determined by avoiding jeopardy throws, avoiding fumbles when sacked or pressured. And that is where we need to see Cutter Boley make a very clear improvement from last season. If he's able to do that, then I think that this skill group is in very good shape to be successful offensively, paired with a offensive line that I am more bullish on than I had maybe expected, which we're going to talk about in the second part of our series. But if ASU is a little bit more turnover prone than what the coaches would hope and expect, that is going to be an albatross that they wear that drags them down a little bit this season.
Well, that'll do it for part 1 of our 4-part series leading up to ASU football fall camp. So make sure you don't go anywhere. We'll have part 2 coming out probably around a day or two from now and keep these dropping consistently heading up to that August 5th first football practice. We appreciate anybody that made it through this entire episode, and we hope you all have a good one.